"Look at that fat pig over there." Those were the exact words my daughter Sarah screamed at her birthday party, pointing straight at me while her fancy friends all stared. The beautiful garden party in Miami, Florida was full of 200 people who all turned to look at me like I was some kind of monster. My face got hot with shame. My hands were shaking as I held the little present I wrapped so carefully. But then something happened that would change everything. Mr. Jackson, the father of Sarah's boyfriend, a very important-looking man in an expensive black suit who had been laughing with everyone else, suddenly stopped. His eyes got really big when he looked at my face. "Wait," he said quietly, walking toward me while everyone else kept being mean. Aren't you my new boss?" "My name is Robert Chen, but people call me Bobby. I'm 60 years old, and for the last 30 years I've been like a ghost. After my wife died when Sarah was only 10 years old, I became that person nobody sees. The person who fixes things in big office buildings late at night. The person who takes the bus for 1 whole hour to get to work. The person who buys clothes from the cheap store and counts every penny before spending even $1. Sarah grew up feeling embarrassed about me, about my simple job, about my rough hands that always smelled like soap and cleaning stuff, about my old shoes that made squeaky sounds on the shiny floors of the fancy buildings where I worked every single night. What she never knew, what nobody could imagine, was that while I was quietly fixing broken things in those offices, I was listening very carefully. I listened to the business people working late at night. I heard their plans, their problems, and their secret money talks. For many years, I soaked up knowledge like a dry sponge soaks up water. With the tiny bit of money I saved, starting with just $25 in something called stocks that I heard a boss lady talking about, then $50, I started putting my money in special places where it could grow. My small apartment got filled with used books about money and business newspapers that I found in the recycling bins at work. I studied every night after coming home, my eyes red and tired, but my heart beating fast with hope. While Sarah thought I was just a sad, failing father, I was secretly building something huge. My money started making more money. I bought small houses and buildings using fake company names so nobody would know it was me. I bought pieces of companies that were doing badly, but then did really well later. For 20 years, I wore the cheapest clothes, ate the simplest food, and did the same boring routine every day. But my bank account grew to numbers most people can't even imagine. And now, at Sarah's party, Mr. Jackson recognized my face. He was the same man whose company I had just bought for $32 million. $32 million, just 3 weeks before. The man who signed the papers selling his company without knowing that the mysterious buyer, someone called R.J. Chen Investments, was actually the same person his daughter's friends just called a fat pig in public. I could see the exact moment when the memories clicked into place in his brain. My face on the video calls, my signature on the papers, my voice during the phone meetings where we talked about buying his company. The quietness started spreading from where we were standing to the rest of the garden like when you drop a stone in water and the ripples go out. The guests noticed Mr. Jackson's shocked face, his pale skin, and the way he stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. Sarah, who had been laughing with her friends about making me feel bad, started to understand that something was terribly wrong. Her mean smile slowly disappeared as she watched Mr. Jackson walk toward me with careful, slow steps. "Sir," Mr. Jackson whispered, his voice so quiet I could barely hear him. Is that you?" His hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone, looking for the business emails, the company pictures, anything to make sure what his brain was telling him was actually true. The woman he just laughed at, the woman he thought was an embarrassment to his family, was the same person who now controlled whether his company would live or die, and whether his family would have money or be poor. And I, Bobby the Invisible, Bobby the Fat Pig, stood there holding my small present wrapped in cheap paper, knowing that my life was about to change forever. Because after so many years of being quiet and hidden, the moment when I could finally speak had arrived. The look in Mr. Jackson's eyes was like watching someone put together a puzzle in super slow motion. His fingers trembled as he scrolled on his phone's screen, looking desperately for the business emails about selling his company. I could hear his shaky breathing as he looked at the company picture of R.J. Chen, the CEO, and then looked at M.E., the man standing in front of him wearing a $15 blue shirt from the discount store. "Oh my God," he whispered, and those 3 words cut through the party noise like a sharp knife. You're the one who bought Jackson Manufacturing." Sarah rushed over, her high heels clicking on the stone pathway like tiny hammer hits. "What are you talking about, Mr. Jackson?" she asked in that fake sweet voice she used when she wanted something. "This is my dad, Robert. You know, the one I told you about who fixes toilets and broken lights in buildings." She laughed nervously, but I could see her eyes darting back and forth between Mr. Jackson and me, trying to figure out what was happening. My heart was beating so loudly, I was sure everyone could hear it like a big drum. For 20 years, I had kept this secret locked up like buried treasure in the ground. Every night, after coming home from fixing things in offices, I sat at my small desk and made deals worth millions of dollars. I had 3 phones, one regular one that Sarah knew about, one for business that I used for important calls, and one emergency phone I only used for the most secret business deals. I had created such a complicated web of fake companies and hidden investments that even the best detective couldn't have figured out it was me. Mr. Jackson's company had been losing money badly for months, $2 million in debt, people suing them, and broken promises to workers. When my lawyers told me I could buy it, I saw more than just red numbers on paper. I saw years of honest work and good employees who didn't deserve to lose their jobs because Mr. Jackson, even though he was a nice man, had made some really bad decisions. I paid $32 million not because I wanted the company, but because I wanted to save the lives and families who depended on those jobs. "Mr. Jackson, you're scaring me," Sarah said, but the confident sound in her voice was gone. "What does my dad have to do with your company?" Marcus, her boyfriend, walked over, nervously fixing his tie. He was a handsome young man, 29 years old, used to having nice things, but without his girlfriend's meanness. He had his father's kindness, but not his experience in understanding tricky situations. Mr. Jackson looked directly into my eyes, and in that moment I saw respect where there had been laughter just minutes before. "Mr. Chen," he said, using my business name with a respect that made nearby guests turn their heads. "I want to personally thank you for saving my family's company. Without you, 300 employees would have lost their jobs this week." The silence that came next was so thick you could cut it with scissors. Sarah stood frozen like a statue, her mouth slightly open as her brain tried to understand Mr. Jackson's words. "Mr. Chen," she repeated slowly. "My dad's name is Chen, but—" Her voice got higher, pulling the attention of more guests who started gathering around us, making an accidental circle. I still didn't say anything. For years, I had perfected the art of being silent, of being invisible, of letting other people fill the quiet spaces with their own guesses. But now, every second of silence was like acid dripping onto the perfect picture Sarah had painted for her party. I could see her mind working frantically, remembering all the times she made fun of how poor I was, all the times she lied to her friends about my job, all the times she pretended I didn't exist. "Dad," she finally whispered, and the word sounded strange coming from her mouth after the public embarrassment just minutes ago. "Is what Mr. Jackson is saying true?" Her eyes were shining with confusion, hope, and something more dangerous, greed. I could see the wheels turning in her head, thinking about possibilities, imagining what this might mean for her future and her money. The guests whispered to each other, creating background noise like angry bees. I heard pieces of conversations. "He's a millionaire." "Sarah's dad?" How is that possible? He always looked so poor. The irony was delicious and bitter at the same time. The same people who laughed at me 15 minutes ago now looked at me with curiosity and fake respect. Mr. Jackson reached out his hand to me, a gesture that was so different from the humiliation he witnessed moments earlier. "Please allow me to introduce you correctly to my family," he said seriously. "This is Robert Chen, the businessman who just saved my company and the jobs of 300 people." It was my moment. After so many years of hiding behind fake company names and lawyers who handled everything for me, after years of being treated like I was nothing by my own daughter, I finally had the chance to speak. But when I opened my mouth, the words that came out were not what Sarah expected to hear. "Mr. Jackson," I said in a soft but clear voice, "I appreciate your kind words, but I think there's been a misunderstanding." The hope in Sarah's eyes turned to relief, thinking I was about to say it wasn't true. "I didn't buy your company to be recognized or thanked. I did it because it was the right thing to do." I paused, looking directly at my daughter. "It's something I learned from watching so much unnecessary suffering in this world." Sarah blinked, confused. I hadn't said yes or no about being the buyer, but I had planted a seed of doubt that was going to torture her mind. I could see her brain struggling between relief and suspicion, between the shame of humiliating me and the tempting possibility that everything was true. And I, Bobby the Invisible, smiled for the first time all night, knowing the game had just begun. The seed of doubt grew like wildfire in Sarah's eyes. For the next few days after the party, she wouldn't stop calling me. First, there were sweet messages pretending to care about me like a good daughter. "Daddy, are you okay? You looked very nervous at my party." Then came the direct questions. "Did you know Mr. Jackson before today?" And finally, the desperation. "I need you to tell me the truth about what Mr. Jackson said." I kept doing my routine like nothing had happened. Every morning at 4:30, I woke up in my small 2-bedroom apartment. I ate black coffee and toast for breakfast. I put on my work uniform and took the bus that took me to the buildings where I worked. But what Sarah didn't know was that during those bus rides, on my business phone, I was controlling a $150 million operation. $150 million spread across investments all over the country. On Tuesday night, Sarah showed up at my apartment without telling me she was coming. I heard her struggling with the old lock on the main building door, saying bad words under her breath. And she finally got to my door. She was wearing a cream-colored, expensive coat that cost more than my 6 months of rent. Her fancy Italian shoes looked completely out of place in my worn-out hallway with walls that desperately needed fresh paint. "Dad, we need to talk," she announced, sitting on my thrift store couch and looking around with that familiar look of disgust. "I can't stop thinking about what happened at my party. Mr. Jackson seemed different with you, like he respected you in some strange way." I poured myself a cup of tea and sat across from her in my favorite chair, the one I had found on the street 12 years ago and fixed up myself with cheap fabric. "Your party was beautiful, Sarah. Marcus seems like a good man." My voice was calm, but inside I felt like a hurricane of emotions. This was the first time in years my daughter had come to my house on her own, and it was only because she suspected I might have money. "Don't change the subject," she burst out, jumping off the couch like a spring. "Mr. Jackson said you are Chen. He said you bought his company for millions of dollars. Is it true or not?" Her voice cracked on the last word, showing the desperation she had been carrying for days. I took a sip of my tea, feeling the warmth go down my throat. "Sarah, look at me," I said softly. "Do you really believe that I, who fixes toilets and broken sinks for a living, who wears clothes from discount stores, who lives in this tiny apartment, could be a millionaire?" I stood up and held out my hands to her, showing my rough palms and short, clean fingernails. "These hands have scrubbed thousands of floors and fixed thousands of broken things. Do they look like the hands of a CEO?" But I saw something dangerous flicker in her eyes, a spark of suspicion that wouldn't be easily put out. Then explain why Mr. Jackson called you Mr. Chen like you were important. Explain why he looked at you as if you were somebody. It was time to give Sarah exactly what she needed to torture herself. Perhaps, I said slowly, Mr. Jackson confused me with someone else. Or maybe, I paused dramatically. I had something on my face that reminded him of someone from his business past. Men his age sometimes see ghosts where there are none. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. And Sarah, with her paranoid mind and heart full of greed, filled the empty spaces with her worst fears and best hopes. I watched her calculate, think, and imagine possibilities. But what if he wasn't confused? She murmured, more to herself than to me. What if you really have money hidden somewhere? Over the next few days, Sarah became like a detective in a mystery movie. She started showing up at strange hours without telling me, sneakily looking around my apartment when she thought I wasn't watching. One afternoon, I found her going through my desk while I was making dinner. I was just looking for a pen, she lied. But I knew she had been looking through my papers. What she didn't know was that all my important documents were in a safe box at the city's fanciest bank. My apartment had exactly what it appeared to have: electricity bills, grocery receipts, old magazines, and library books. But I had carefully left some fake clues. A bank receipt for $200 that looked like maybe it had been changed. A phone number written down that belonged to a pizza place, but could look like a business number if you didn't call to check. On Friday, Sarah arrived with Marcus. It was the first time my future son-in-law had been in my apartment, and I could see the discomfort on his face as he tried to find a place to sit without seeming rude. He was a genuinely kind young man, raised with lots of money, but without his girlfriend's cruelty. "Mr. Chen," Marcus said with the polite manners he had been taught since childhood. "Sarah has told me about the confusion at her party. My father has been very nervous ever since. He keeps saying that you look familiar to him in some professional way." Sarah sat on the edge of my couch, her eyes constantly moving around the room as if searching for hidden proof. "Marcus thinks we should clear up this misunderstanding," she said. But her tone suggested she didn't want to clear up anything. She wanted to confirm her suspicions. "What kind of clearing up?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. But inside, I felt like I was playing chess against an expert, every move calculated to take the game where I wanted it to go. Marcus cleared his throat. "Well, my father mentioned that the company was bought by someone named R.J. Chen Investments. We thought maybe you know this person, or maybe." He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with where the conversation was going. "Maybe there's some family connection we didn't know about." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes bright with anticipation. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the question she had been thinking about for days. But my answer left her more confused than ever. "Chen is a very common last name," I said simply. "But if Mr. Jackson really wants to meet the person who bought his company, I'm sure he can contact his lawyers to arrange a meeting." I smiled slightly, though I don't understand why he would want to personally thank someone for a business deal. Sarah practically jumped off the couch. "Because she saved hundreds of jobs, because she paid more than the company was worth, because it was an act of kindness, not just business." Her words revealed that she had been investigating on her own, probably pressuring Marcus for financial details about his family. And there was the confession. She already knew much more than she had admitted. Sarah had been putting together the puzzle piece by piece. Now all she needed was my confirmation to complete the picture. But I had no intention of giving it to her so easily. Instead, I sat in my old chair, sipping my cheap tea, looking at my daughter with the calm expression of a man who had nothing to hide. And for the first time since the party, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Fear of being wrong, but also fear of being right. The fear in Sarah's eyes transformed into pure obsession. Over the next few weeks, her visits became more frequent and more invasive. She arrived at all hours, sometimes with Marcus, sometimes alone, always with new questions that she made sound casual but which I knew she had carefully practiced. Dad, have you ever thought about moving to a better place? Wouldn't you like to have a car instead of taking the bus? Her eyes scanned my apartment like radar, searching for anything that didn't fit with the image of poverty she had known all her life. One Wednesday afternoon, as I was coming home from work, I found her sitting on the building steps. She had been waiting for me for 3 hours in the cold rain. Her designer coat was soaked, and her makeup was running down her face. "I need the truth," she said, her voice breaking when I got close. "Marcus is starting to think I'm crazy. His family looks at me strangely, but I know something doesn't add up, Dad. I can feel it in my bones." I brought her up to my apartment and made her hot tea while she shivered on my couch. For the first time in years, I saw genuine vulnerability in Sarah, not the fake manipulation she usually used. "Tell me what you've been thinking," I said, sitting across from her like I did so many times when she was a little girl and had nightmares. "I've been investigating," she confessed, looking at her trembling hands wrapped around the cup. "I hired a private detective to find out about R.J. Chen Investments." My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face neutral. "And what did he find?" I asked with genuine curiosity. I had spent millions of dollars over the years to keep my business identity completely separate from my personal life. "Nothing," Sarah whispered, the frustration clear in her voice. "It's like Chen is a ghost. The company has businesses registered in 10 different countries, but there are never any public photos, never any interviews, never any appearances at social events. The lawyers handle everything through other people. The detective said in 25 years of his career, he'd never seen anyone so careful about their privacy." I leaned forward, pretending to be interested. "And that makes you suspicious of me." Sarah looked up, her eyes red from crying. "Dad, you worked in those office buildings at night. You were there when the business people worked late, when they made their important phone calls, when they left documents on their desks. Did you never learn anything you could have used?" It was a smart question, closer to the truth than she imagined. "Sarah," I said softly, "if I had learned business secrets while fixing things in offices, don't you think I would have improved my life a long time ago? Don't you think we would have lived better when you were a child?" But she shook her head violently. "Maybe you didn't want anyone to suspect. Maybe it was safer to live poor while you secretly saved up money." Her voice rose, filled with desperation that broke my heart. "Mr. Jackson keeps asking about you. He keeps saying your face is familiar from important video meetings. Marcus is starting to ask strange questions about our family." I got up and went to the kitchen, needing a moment to process everything. Sarah had hired a professional detective and still couldn't connect me to R.J. Chen Investments. That meant my precautions had worked, but it also meant she wouldn't give up easily. When I returned with more tea, I found her looking through the books on my shelf, those used finance books I had been collecting for decades. "Why do you have all these books about investments and business?" she asked, holding up a market analysis book I had bought for 50 cents at a garage sale. "Since when are you interested in finance?" Her tone was accusatory, as if she had found evidence of a crime. "I buy them because they're cheap and I like to read," I lied partially. "Besides, after years of hearing business conversations while working, I developed curiosity about how companies actually work." It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. Sarah put the book down and turned to me with desperate eyes. "Dad, if you have money, if you have even some money saved up, I need you to tell me. Marcus and I are having financial problems." This was the first time she had mentioned money troubles, and I saw the perfect opportunity to get information. "What kind of problems?" I asked with genuine fatherly concern. Sarah collapsed onto the couch, finally revealing the truth she had been hiding behind her perfect image. "Mr. Jackson's company was worse off than they told us before the party. Even after the sale, there are huge personal debts. The house we live in has a big loan on it. The cars, the jewelry, everything was bought on credit cards, thinking the company would keep making money." There was the confession I had been waiting for. "How much do you owe?" I asked gently. Sarah covered her face with her hands. $100,000 on credit cards, $200,000 on the house loan, $75,000 in personal bank loans. And that's not counting the party expenses, which we put entirely on credit because we thought we could pay it later. $375,000 in debt, an amount that was nothing to me but represented total ruin for them. And what are you planning to do? I asked, though I already knew where this conversation was headed. Mr. Jackson is trying to get another job, but at his age, it's difficult. Marcus is looking too, but his experience is all tied to the family business. And she hesitated, biting her lower lip like she did when she was a child and had done something wrong. I thought maybe if you really do have money hidden somewhere, you could help us. Not as a gift, but as a loan. We would pay you back with interest. It was the moment I had been waiting for weeks. Sarah had finally shown her cards. She was in financial crisis and saw me as her only possible way out. But instead of saying yes or no about my fortune, I decided to give her something even more dangerous, hope mixed with uncertainty. Sarah, I said slowly, if I had that kind of money, do you really think you would be here begging me after calling me a fat pig in front of 200 people? My voice was soft, but it carried the weight of decades of humiliation. Do you really think someone with money would have silently accepted all the years of disrespect you've given me? I watched my words hit her like slaps across the face. Sarah began to cry for real, tears of guilt mixed with financial panic. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry I treated you that way. But right now, you are the only person in the world I can trust. If you have anything you can lend us, I swear we will pay you back every single penny. I sat beside her and took her hands, feeling them tremble in mine. Let me ask you something, Sarah. If I really were a millionaire, if I really were R.J. Chen, what would you do? How would that change your life? Her eyes lit up with a dangerous mixture of relief and greed. It would mean we can save our house, our future, our marriage. It would mean I don't have to live in fear of losing everything. She paused, looking directly at me. But it would also mean I've been the worst daughter in the world, having the only person who truly loves me. It was a good answer, but I knew Sarah was an expert at saying what people wanted to hear. The real question was, what would she do when she knew the truth? Would she love me for my money or forgive me despite it? Sarah's tears quickly dried as she saw that I didn't immediately answer her question about what she would do if I were a millionaire. I watched her wipe her eyes with the back of her hand, rearranging her expression of vulnerability into something more calculated. Dad, she said in a firmer voice, I need you to answer something directly. Are you R.J. Chen or not? I got up from the couch and walked to the window that looked out at the street filled with potholes and broken streetlights. Sarah, imagine for a moment that the answer was yes. Imagine that all these years while you were embarrassed of me, I was building a multi-million-dollar business empire. I turned to look at her. What do you think that would mean about you as a person? Her face went pale. It would mean I'm a monster, she whispered. It would mean I hated the only person who sacrificed everything for me. But then, as if someone had flipped a switch in her brain, her eyes got hard. But it would also mean you lied to me for decades, that you let me live feeling superior when in reality I was the one who had nothing. There was the Sarah I knew. Instead of taking responsibility for her cruelty, she was already looking for ways to become the victim. So, I said calmly, you'd prefer that I was truly poor. Would you feel better knowing that your insults and humiliations really hurt someone who had no power to defend himself? Sarah fell silent for a long moment, processing the logical trap I had set for her. Finally, she spoke in a small voice. I just want to understand why Mr. Jackson recognized you. I just want to know if there's any possibility that we can get out of this financial crisis. It was time to take the game to the next level. I went to my bedroom and returned with an old shoebox. I placed it on the coffee table between us. There's something I've never shown you, I said, opening the box slowly. Inside were old documents, photos, and some papers I had prepared specifically for this moment. I pulled out a 12-year-old photo of me leaving an elegant office building. I was dressed in humble work clothes, but the luxury building behind me was clearly visible. A coworker took this photo, I lied. That day. I was fixing the air conditioning at Chen International Corporation offices. I watched Sarah's eyes fix on the building's name visible in the photo. Chen, she murmured, taking the photo with trembling hands. You worked for a Chen company. Her mind was working furiously, connecting dots I had carefully planted. I pulled out another document, a 10-year-old pay stub for maintenance services where I had digitally changed the employer's name to read Chen Enterprises. I worked for them for years, I said, until I paused dramatically, until I had to quit for personal reasons. Sarah studied the receipt as if it were a treasure map. Personal reasons. Her voice was barely a whisper. What kind of personal reasons would make you quit a stable job? This was the most delicate part of my plan. I needed to plant the seed of a truth that was believable enough to explain everything but vague enough to maintain the mystery. There were problems in the company, things I saw while working at night, conversations I overheard. I sat down heavily, as if the memory was painful. One day, the CEO asked me to stay after hours for a private meeting. Sarah's eyes widened. Did he ask you to be a witness to something? Her imagination was filling in the blanks exactly as I had planned. I can't talk about it, I said, pretending to be nervous. I signed a paper promising not to tell anyone, but let's just say there are reasons why someone might want to keep my identity a secret. I put the documents back into the box, noticing how Sarah followed every move with hungry eyes. Dad, she said urgently, are you telling me that you know a secret about RJ Chen? That maybe you worked directly for this person? She leaned forward. Is that why Mr. Jackson recognized you? Because you were in important meetings? I didn't answer directly, but my silence was more powerful than any words. I watched Sarah build her own theory, that I had witnessed something important, that RJ Chen had paid me somehow to keep quiet, that maybe there was even some sort of blackmail involved. It was a completely wrong theory, but it was believable enough to explain everything that was unexplainable. Do you have money from that time? She asked directly. Did they give you some kind of payment for your silence? Her eyes shone with hope and something darker, the possibility that her father was a successful blackmailer. Sarah, I said firmly, what happened during that time of my life is complicated. There are powerful people involved, legal agreements I can't break, and consequences that could affect more people than just us. I stood up and began to put the box away. But if you're truly in a financial crisis, maybe there's something I can do. Sarah jumped off the couch as if she had been shocked with electricity. What kind of something? Her voice was high-pitched, desperate. Do you have access to money? Can you get a loan? Do you know someone who can help us? I looked her directly in the eyes. I can make some phone calls. There are people who owe me favors from that time, but I would need to know exactly how much you need and what for. It was a vague promise but full of possibilities, designed to keep Sarah hooked while I decided my next move. $375,000, she said immediately. We need that much to pay off all the debts and start over. Her hands trembled as she spoke. We could pay interest, give you something valuable as security, whatever is necessary. It's a lot of money, I said thoughtfully. I would have to make very important calls, contact people who prefer to stay private. I paused. And I would have to be sure that you understand the seriousness of what I'm willing to do. Sarah nodded her head violently. We understand, we're serious. This isn't a game, Dad, it's our life. But then, as if a new idea had crossed her mind, she looked at me with suspicion. But what would you have to do in return? What kind of favors would you have to ask? It was a smart question, and I saw that Sarah was beginning to understand that any solution to her financial crisis might come with a price she hadn't considered. That, I said mysteriously, depends on how much you're willing to risk to save your future. And with those words, I left my daughter in a state of agonizing anticipation. knowing she would spend the next few days imagining all the possibilities, both wonderful and terrible, of what I might be willing to do for her. For the next 3 days, Sarah called me every 2 hours. Her messages went from desperate gratitude to pure anxiety, and then to something bordering on obsession. "Did you make the calls, Dad? When will we know something? Do Marcus and I need to be present for a meeting." Her voice became sharper with each call, and I could hear how the tension was affecting her relationship, with Marcus constantly asking her what was going on. On Friday night, I decided it was time for the next phase of my plan. I called Sarah and told her I had news. "I need you and Marcus to come to my apartment tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. And Sarah," I paused dramatically, "make sure no one else knows about this meeting, especially Marcus's family." When they arrived on Saturday, Sarah was